I have followed the Duke of Wraymoor into 2 wars and 1 duel, and I have seen him do things that would freeze the blood in your throat. But if you ask me, and men do ask me, now that he is gone and I am old and the fire is warm, when it was that I first understood what manner of man he truly was, I do not tell them about the cannon at Alderver or the morning on the sands. I tell them about the river. It was the worst winter the North had seen in 40 years. The moors had gone white to the sky and stayed white, and the wind came down off the fells with a sound like something grieving. I had ridden up from London to sit out Christmas with him at Wraymoor Hall, because he had no one else, and neither, in truth, had I, and because a man who has fought beside another man does not like to think of him alone in a great cold house counting his enemies. They called him the Beast of the North by then. You will have heard the name even now. They said he had killed his own sister with his cruelty, that he kept the hall shuttered because he could not bear the sight of honest faces, that the scar down the left side of his jaw was the mark of God's disfavor. None of it was true, or rather all of it was true the way a lie is true, bent from something that had really happened until you could no longer see the shape of the first thing. I knew the shape of the first thing. I will come to it. We were on the North Road near midnight, the 2 of us, riding back from the far tenants where a buyer had come down under the snow and a family with it, and Wraymoor had gone out himself in that weather because he would send no man where he would not go. He rode ahead of me, black on a black horse, silent as he always was, and I remember thinking that the silence of him was the loudest thing on that whole white moor. Then we heard the coach. You do not forget a sound like that. A hired coach, going far too fast for the ice, the horses screaming, and under it all a man's voice, not the driver's, a second man up behind shouting, drive on, take the ford. And a woman inside crying out that there was no bridge, that the ford was frozen, that he would kill them all. He was right, she was right. There was no bridge. There was only the worn, black and swollen under a skin of ice, and the old summer ford that no living man crossed in January. Wraymoor was moving before I had understood any of it. He put his horse straight down the bank into the dark, and I heard him roar one word, stop, in a voice that should have stopped the moon in its course. And for one instant I thought it had. The coach slewed sideways on the frozen shallows, the near horse went down, the traces snapped like thread, and the whole black bulk of it slid out onto the river ice and hung there, groaning. Then the ice opened. I have tried over the years to describe the sound. It is not a crack. A crack is a small, clean thing. This was a long, tearing, living roar, as if the river had been waiting under there all winter with its mouth shut and had at last decided to speak. The back of the coach went down first. I saw the driver flung clear onto the good ice, saw the second man, the one who had shouted drive on, leap for the bank and reach it, scrambling, not once looking behind him. And I saw, in the last light before the lantern drowned, a white face at the coach window and 2 bare hands pressed flat to the glass. I am not a coward. I have stood in a square while French cavalry came on at the trot, and I did not run. But I will tell you honestly that I sat my horse on that bank, and I did not move, because everything I knew told me that whoever was inside that coach was already dead, and that a man who went in after them would only make 2 corpses where there had been 1. Wraymoor did not know that. Or he knew it and it did not weigh with him. He was off his horse and across the bad ice at a dead run, and where it would not bear him he did not slow. He simply went down into the black water as though it were a door he had every right to open. He was under a long time, long enough that I got down at last and staggered out as far as I dared and lay flat on the groaning ice with my arms in the river to the shoulder, shouting his name into the dark. Long enough that I began, God forgive me, to grieve him. And then his head came up not 3 feet from my hands, hair streaming, mouth wide for air, and in the crook of his other arm a white shape that did not move. He could not climb. There was nothing to climb. So he did the only thing left to a drowning man with a burden he would not set down. He heaved her up out of the water and onto the ice toward me with the last of his strength, the way you throw a rope to a stranger, and then the current took him under the shelf and I lost him. I got her. God knows how. I got hold of a fistful of sodden cloak and dragged her up the ice on my belly, and she was so cold and so still that I thought I had saved a dead woman for nothing. And I was screaming his name at the hole in the river when a hand came up out of it, his hand, that great scarred hand, 20 feet downstream where the ice was thicker, and he broke it with his fist, punched clean up through it from below, and dragged himself out into the snow like something being born. We got her to the hall over his saddle, wrapped in both our coats and his body against her back to give her what warmth was left in him, and he would not let me take her from him at the door, nor at the stair, nor at the fire. He carried a drowned stranger through his own black house himself, dripping river water on the marble his sister had loved, and he laid her down before the great hearth in the hall, and he knelt there beside her, and he did not move. "She is breathing," Mrs. Hale, the housekeeper, said, on her knees on the other side, her ear at the girl's blue lips. "Your Grace, she is breathing." I saw something go through him then. Not relief. It was too large and too old to be only relief. It was the look of a man who has been holding one particular door shut for years, leaning all his weight against it, and has just felt, for the first time, the smallest give. Her name was Eleanor Ashby, though we did not learn it for 2 days, and no one had ever, I think, called her anything grander than Nell. She woke on the 3rd morning into a room she did not know, in a bed hung with curtains older than the parish, and the first thing she did, before she asked where she was, before she asked who had saved her, was to put her hand flat to her breastbone and go white with a fear that had nothing to do with drowning. "My trunk," she said, her voice was a thread. "There was a trunk, a small trunk with a please, please, is it?" "It is safe," Mrs. Hale said, though she looked to me, for we had recovered no trunk. The trunk was at the bottom of the warren with the coach and one drowned horse. I did not say so. There was something in the girl's face that I did not want to break with the truth before she was strong enough to hold it. She was not a beauty in the way the word is used in ballrooms. She was small and plainly made, with brown hair and a wide, grave mouth and eyes that were too large for the thinness of her face. She had been going hungry, I thought, and for some while before the river. But when she looked at you, she looked all the way in, without flinching and without asking anything, and I found I could not hold her gaze the way I have held the gaze of generals. There was a steadiness in her that had been paid for. "You do not get eyes like that cheaply." "Who saved me?" she asked, when she had drunk a little broth and the shivering had eased. "The master of this house," said Mrs. Hale, with a stiffness in it, for the servants loved him and hated to hear him spoken of ill and had grown used to defending him before he was even accused. "The Duke of Wraymoor." The girl's face did not do what other faces did at that name. She only nodded slowly and looked toward the door as if she might see him there. "Then I owe him my life," she said simply, "and I have nothing in the world to pay it with. He will think me an ungrateful wretch." "He will think nothing of the sort," I said. "He does not do it to be paid." She turned those great eyes on me. "Everyone does everything to be paid," she said, not bitterly, only the way you would state that rain is wet. "It is only that the price is not always coin." And then, before I could answer that, she was asleep again, worn out by the little she had spent. He would not go in to see her. I noticed it and said nothing for a day, and then I could not help myself, because I had watched him carry her through his own house like a chalice, and now he would not so much as cross her threshold. "She is asking to thank you," I told him. We were in the library, which was the only room in the hall he truly lived in, the fire enormous, the shelves gone up into darkness. He stood at the window with his back to me, watching the snow, and the scar caught the light when he turned his head. "She may thank Mrs. Hale," he said. "Wraymoor. I did nothing that any man would not have done." "I was there," I said. "I am a man. I did not do it. I stood on the bank and I let you go in alone, and I have not slept properly since for the shame of it, so do not stand there and tell me any man would have done it, because it is not true and you know it is not true." I had never spoken to him so in 20 years. He turned fully round and looked at me, and I made myself hold it. She is frightened out of her wits about a lost trunk. She was being driven onto that ice by a man who then left her to drown and ran. That was no accident, and you know that too. Someone wants that girl dead, and they nearly had her, and she is lying in your best bed not knowing whether to weep for gratitude or for terror. And you will not go up because... I stopped, because I had seen all at once the whole of it. Because the last woman you carried out of the cold, I said more gently, you could not save. For a long moment he did not speak, and the fire filled the silence with its small collapsing sounds. Then he said, very low, "Go up, Edmund, sit with her, find out who is trying to kill her." And he turned back to the snow, and I understood that I had been dismissed, and that I had also somehow been thanked. Here is the shape of the first thing. I will tell it quickly, the way he never could. The Duke of Wraymoor had a sister once, Lady Honoria, younger than he by 6 years, the light of that whole grim house, the one warm window in it. And when he was away at the wars, a man came into the country, a smiling, well-dressed, well-connected man named Sir Julius Crane, who wanted the Wraymoor money and the Wraymoor name and could not have them honestly, and so set himself to have them the other way through the sister. He courted her. He compromised her. And when the old Duke found them out and refused the match and threatened Crane with the law, Sir Julius Crane did a thing that only a certain kind of man can do. He made it all her fault. He put it about cleverly, through the right drawing rooms, that Lady Honoria of Wraymoor was a wanton who had thrown herself at him and been refused. And he did it so well that when she went, at last, out onto the sands below the hall in a February dusk and did not come back, the county said it was madness in the blood and looked sideways at her brother, and began, that very season, to call him the beast. He had come home from the war to a dead sister and a poisoned name and a country that flinched from him in the street. And he had spent 11 years since then in that shuttered house, feared and alone, hunting one thing and one thing only, proof. Proof of what Crane had done, proof that would take the smiling man by the throat before the law. He had never found it. Crane was too careful. Crane was, by that winter, a very great man indeed, a baronet with the ear of ministers, spoken of for higher things, untouchable. I tell you this now so that you will understand what happened when Nell Ashby was well enough to talk, and told me, in that grave thread of a voice, why she had been on the North Road in the dark. I was companion, she said, to an old lady, Lady Marchbourne. Her people are down in the south. I had been with her 4 years. She took me on when my father died. He was a curate, we had nothing. And she was not kind exactly, but she was fair, and she talked to me as though I were a person and not a piece of furniture, which is more than most. She turned the cup in her hands. She died a fortnight ago. And at the very end, when the doctors had gone and it was only me, she caught my wrist. She had almost no strength left, but she caught it hard, and she made me fetch a packet from behind a brick in the chimney of her dressing room. A packet of letters, sealed. And she said, "Nell, you are the only honest creature in this house. Take these to my brother in the north, to Lord Ashwood, and put them in no hand but his, and trust no one, do you hear me? For there are men who will kill for what is in here and never hang for it." The fire cracked. She did not look at it. "I thought it was the fever talking," she said. "I did as she asked because a dying woman asked it, not because I believed it. And then she was dead, and her nephew turned me out of the house that same day with a month's wages I never got in my little trunk, and I put the packet at the bottom of it under my mending, and I took the mail north because Lord Ashwood is in the north and I had given my word." She stopped. "There was a man at the first inn who watched me, and a man at the second. And by the third I knew, the way you know, and I paid a private coach with almost my last shilling to go on through the night, and the man behind, the man who took the fare, I thought he was the guard. He had them drive faster and faster, and when I begged him to slow, he only smiled at me, and then we were on the ice." She looked up. "And then a voice out of the dark told the whole world to stop. And I woke up here." "Do you know," I asked very carefully, What was in the letters? No, she said. They were sealed, and I would not have broken a dead woman's seal for the crown of England. She said it plainly as a fact about herself, and I believed her utterly, and I understood in the same instant that this was exactly why she was still alive to say it, because she was too honest to be curious, and so she carried the thing that could hang a great man without ever once looking at it, like a child carrying gunpowder to the fire. The letters are lost, I told her, because she had earned the truth. The trunk went into the river. I am sorry. I watched it land on her, not fear this time. Grief, a clean, quiet grief. The grief of a woman who has failed at the one thing a dying friend asked of her, and who counts that failure as her own, though she nearly died of trying. Then I have broken my word, she said, and it was all for nothing. And she turned her face to the wall, and I had the sense to leave her. I went down and I told him. All of it. Lady Marchbourne, Lord Ashwood, the sealed packet, the men at the inns, the smiling man who took the fare. And when I said the name that the girl had never known to say, when I told him that Lord Ashwood was Lady Marchbourne's brother, and that Lady Marchbourne had been, before her marriage, a crane, I watched the Duke of Wraymoor go absolutely still. Julius Crane's aunt, he said. His aunt. Estranged from him these 20 years by the account of it, a woman who knew him from the cradle, a woman who kept letters behind a brick, and on her deathbed sent them the length of England to be put into no hand but her brother's, because there are men who will kill for what is in here and never hang for it. I let it sit. Wraymoor. She was not sending Ashwood a keepsake. She was sending him a rope. And the man who tried to drown that girl on your river was sent by Julius Crane to see it never arrived. For 11 years, I had watched him hunt a thing he could not find. And now the thing had come to him, had been driven onto his own ice in the dark and dropped, half drowned, into his own arms. And it was gone again to the bottom of the Warren, and the one person alive who could speak to any of it was a penniless companion who had never even broken the seal. He said, "The river is frozen to the bed at the ford. Coaches have been dug out of the Warren before in hard winters." He was already moving. "Get every man on the estate to the ford at first light. Ropes, poles, the ice saws from the tannery. We are going to take that river apart." They came for her before we found it. I should have expected it. Crane's man had reached the bank. He had seen the Wraymoor livery. He had ridden hard and told his master that the girl and the packet were not drowned but housed, of all the houses in England, under the roof of the one man on earth Julius Crane had cause to fear. And Crane, being the kind of man he was, did not wait and wonder. He sent men openly, with a paper in the daylight, the way the powerful take what they want dressed as law, so that resistance to it would itself be a crime. There were 4 of them, and at their head a lean gray person named Speak, who called himself an agent of the family and carried an order under a magistrate's seal for the return of one Eleanor Ashby, a servant absconded from the household of the late Lady Marchbourne, having stolen certain private papers, property of the family. It was beautifully done. On that paper she was not a hunted witness. She was a thief. And a duke who sheltered a thief against a magistrate's order was a duke defying the king's law. They read it out in the great hall, and Nell, who had crept down against all sense when she heard strange horses, wrapped in a borrowed shawl, still gray from the river, heard herself named a thief, and I saw her understand that this was how it would be done. Not with a knife in the dark now, but with the whole polite machinery of England, which would hang her tidily and lawfully and never once get blood on its gloves. "You will produce the woman and the papers," Speak said to the Duke, "and there need be no unpleasantness." I have said that Wraymoor was a silent man. I want you to understand what it was then when he chose to speak. He came down the great stair slowly, and the men at the foot of it drew closer together without meaning to, the way men do near a large animal. He did not raise his voice. He never raised his voice. That was the terror of him. He said, "There are no stolen papers in this house." "The order." "There are no papers," said the Duke, "because they are at the bottom of my river, along with the coach that your master's creature drove onto the ice at midnight to murder that woman where you are standing. I was there. Major Thorne of the 14th was there. We pulled her living out of the Warren with our own hands, and we will both of us swear to the manner of it before any court in the land. How a hired man whipped the horses onto a frozen ford in the dark and leapt clear and left a young woman to drown. That is not the theft of papers, Mr. Speak. That is attempted murder, and I find that I am very interested indeed in the name of the man who paid for it. The silence after that was a thing you could lean on. As for the woman, Wraymoor said, and here, I will remember it to my grave, here he crossed the last of the floor and stood himself between Nell Ashby and the four of them, not grandly, not with a flourish, simply putting his own body in the way as a man puts his body in the way. She is under my protection in my house, and if you wish to take her out of it you will do so over me, and I promise you that you have not been paid enough for that. Speak was a clever man, and a clever man knows when the ground has shifted under him. He had come expecting a frightened girl and a nervous host and a paper that did all the work. He had found instead a duke and a decorated officer who would swear to murder in open court, and the murder was true. And true things are very hard for even great men to make disappear once a duke has decided to say them aloud. They went. They blustered and they threatened the law and they went, and their horses' hooves rang away down the frozen drive, and inside the great hall no one moved for a long moment. Then Nell Ashby, who had stood through the whole of it without a sound, sat down rather suddenly on the bottom stair and put her face in her hands, and I thought she would weep at last. But when she took her hands away her eyes were dry, and she was looking up at the Duke of Wraymoor with an expression I had never seen anyone turn on him in all the years of his exile. She was looking at him as if she saw him, not the beast, not the scar, not the name, him. They will say I am a thief in every county between here and London, she said, and there is nothing I can do to stop them because I am nobody and Sir Julius Crane is a great man. She said the name easily. She did not know yet what it was to him. And you have made yourself their enemy for the sake of a woman you fished out of a river 3 days ago. She shook her head slowly. Why? And the Duke of Wraymoor, who had not answered a personal question in 11 years, looked down at this small, plain, grave-eyed stranger sitting on his stair, and I watched the door he had leaned against for so long come open at last. Because 11 years ago, he said, another man let another woman go down into the cold and told the world it was her own doing, and everyone believed him, and I have never forgiven myself that I was not there to go in after her. He was very quiet. I was there this time, that is all. It is not for your sake, Miss Ashby, or it was not at first. The smallest pause. I find it is beginning to be. We took the river apart. For 2 days every man Wraymoor had, and Wraymoor himself stripped to his shirt in weather that killed sheep on the fell, worked at the ford with saws and poles and ropes, cutting down through 3 feet of ice to the black coach below. Nell would not stay in the house. She came out wrapped in every shawl in the place and stood on the bank all the daylight hours, saying nothing, watching, and when the men's hands failed with cold she was there with hot bricks and hotter tea, and I saw the estate men, who had been afraid of their own master for a decade, begin to look at the pair of them, the silent Duke and the grave girl, and begin, very cautiously, to hope. Servants know before anyone. They always do. On the second afternoon they brought the trunk up. It came out of the river streaming and black, and Nell went down on her knees in the snow and worked the frozen catch with fingers that would not obey her, and the Duke knelt down beside her and did it with his, and inside, under sodden mending, wrapped in oilcloth that Lady Marchbourne, canny to the last, had bound and waxed against exactly this, the packet lay dry. The seal was unbroken. Nell had told the truth about that too. She would not open it. Even then, even soaked and half frozen and vindicated, she held it out to the Duke unbroken and said, it was to go to Lord Ashwood, and to no hand but his. I gave my word. And Wraymoor, who wanted what was inside that packet more than he had wanted anything in 11 years, who had the thing in his own hands at last that could destroy the man who had destroyed his sister. The Duke of Wraymoor looked at the unbroken seal, and at the grave, honest face of the woman holding it out, and he did not take it. "Then we will carry it to Lord Ashwood together," he said, "you and I, and put it in his hand, and let him break the seal, since it was his sister's wish. And whatever is in it will be in it whether I look now or later." He closed her cold fingers back around it with his cold hands. "You kept faith with a dying woman across the length of England, and through the bottom of a river, Miss Ashby. I will not be the man who makes you break it at the last." I do not think she loved him before that. I think she was grateful to him, and I think she had begun to see the man under the name, which is a great deal. But it was there, kneeling in the snow with her frozen fingers folded shut over the packet inside his, that I saw Nell Ashby fall in love with the beast of the north, not because he had saved her from the river, but because he would not let her buy her own life with her honor. Lord Ashwood broke the seal himself, 4 days later in his own library, with the both of them before him and me at the door. I will not set down all that was in those letters, for some of it was a dead woman's private grief, and it is not mine to give away. But the substance of it was this: that Julius Crane, years ago, had written to his aunt in a black hour boasting of exactly how he had ruined a girl in the north, and turned the county against her brother to cover it. Had written it down, in his own hand, in the arrogance of a young man who thought his aunt his ally. And that the old woman had kept every page for 20 years, appalled, waiting for the day she could no longer be hurt by using it, and had spent almost the last breath in her body sending it to the one man who would know what to do. It was the rope. It had been the rope all along. They tried Sir Julius Crane at the Spring Assize, and it was the greatest scandal of that year and several after it, and I will not pretend the law reached quite so far up as it ought. Great men have long arms even from the dock, but reach him it did. His own hand undid him. The county that had called Lady Honoria a wanton read the truth in cold print and turned, the way counties do, all at once and shamelessly, as if they had always known. The smiling man did not smile in the end. He was broken, publicly, wholly, before the very people whose good opinion had been his whole fortune, and he ended somewhere abroad and small and forgotten, which for a man like that is worse than the gallows. And the name of Wraymoor came back into the light. Slowly the North forgives slowly, but it came. Lady Honoria was spoken of gently again, and her brother, the beast, was found, once the county had a reason to look properly, to be nothing of the sort, only a man who had grieved 11 years behind shuttered windows for a sister he could not save, and had at last saved someone else instead. He asked Nell to stay before any of that was settled. I want that understood. He did not wait until his name was clean and her innocence was proved and it was safe. He asked her in the deep of that same winter, in the library, with the trial still to come and the whole thing hanging. I was not meant to hear it, but the door was open, and I am an old soldier and unashamed. "You have nowhere to go," he said to her, gruff, graceless, the worst proposal a duke ever made. "The Marchbourne house is closed to you, and you would not take money from me if I offered it, which I know, so do not trouble to say so. You could stay here." As and the great terrible Duke of Wraymoor, who had faced 4 armed men without moving, faltered like a boy. "Not as a companion, not as anything you are paid for. I have had my fill this winter of people who do things to be paid." He had remembered her own words to me then. He must have made Mrs. Hale repeat them. "Stay because you wish to. Stay because the house has not been warm in 11 years, and it has been warm since you were in it, and I find I cannot go back to the cold now that I know the difference." A long breath. "Stay and be my wife, Nell, not the beast's Charity, the Duke of Wraymoor's Duchess, if you can bear the man under the name." And Nell Ashby, the curate's daughter, the companion, the nobody, the woman who had been named a thief in every county between the North and London, was quiet for a moment, and then she said the truest thing I ever heard anyone say to him. "I was never afraid of you," she said. "Not on the river, not in this house, not for one moment. Everyone told me the beast of the north would be the death of me. And you were the only one in the whole of England who tried to keep me alive. I heard her cross the room to him. I do not stay because I have nowhere to go. I have somewhere to go now, anywhere I like, with a great man's crimes proved and my name my own again. I could go anywhere. A pause, and I could hear the smile come into her grave voice. I am staying because I looked all the way into you the first morning I woke, and I liked what I found there, and I have been looking ever since, and it has only got better with the looking. Yes, I will be your wife, and the first thing I shall do as your duchess is open every shutter in this house and let the light back in." He made a sound I had never heard him make. It took me a moment to understand that the Duke of Wraymoor was laughing. They were married in the little church at Kelder that spring, with the whole county crowding the churchyard to see the beast wed his river girl, and she came up the aisle in a plain gray gown, because she would have no finery bought to hide the woman she had been. And she was, in that plain gray, the most beautiful thing I have ever seen come up an aisle, because of the way he looked at her the whole length of it. He, who had not been able to cross her threshold to be thanked, could not now take his eyes from her for the space of a breath. I stood up with him. He had no one else, as I have said. Or rather, he had by then everyone, but I was his oldest, and it was my right, and I would have fought any man who claimed it. Old men are permitted to be sentimental, and I have earned it, so I will end where I ought. People still ask me sometimes whether it is true, the story of the beast of the north who went down into a frozen river after a stranger. They ask it the way you ask about a legend, half hoping it is too good to be so. I tell them it is truer than they know. I tell them I was there on the bank, and that I did not go in, and that he did not for gain, for there was none to be had. Not because he knew who she was, for he did not even at the first for her sake. He went in because a man was drowning and he could reach her, and because 11 years before someone he loved had gone down into the cold and no one had reached for her at all. He went into the black water carrying all of that, and he came up out of it with a girl in his arms, and neither of them, though they did not know it yet, would ever be cold again. That is the man I followed into 2 wars. That is the man they called a beast. I only wish the world had seen him the way she did, all the way in, from the very first morning, and finding there something worth staying for.